covering the full story of all the topics, especially the things you're just not going to see in local or national media. With that being said, we welcome in our guest, Grover Norquist, the president for Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, we're grateful to have you in. We've been watching you on TV all over national shows, heck, over the past, 20, 30, 40 years. You've been everywhere. You're an icon. We're grateful that you jump in today. Can you remind everybody what exactly you and your group are doing right now and what's at the top of the list right now in 2023 with so much crap going on?
Okay. Well, we're beginning to put together a list of new abuses by the IRS. We've been following this for, as you point out, decades. IRS aide to his home to drop off a note. You could have sent a letter. Yeah. It was about a make-believe problem from 4 years earlier that he had overpaid, not underpaid. This was a way of saying, we know where you live. And we're now finding more of these at a time when the Democrats said, you know what we should do to the IRS? We should give them $80 billion more tax dollars to hire 87,000 more people to do more of this.
Exactly right. Huge fan, first of all. I was here when, I guess you know Dana Lash, the Tea Party started. The Tea Party started and I was like overwhelmed by, oh my God, this is amazing. Why is taxes not more of a populist movement than like, say, abortion or social issues for the Democrats? I've always wondered, why have the Republicans not picked up the moniker of taxes and run as fast as they could with it and say, we're going to win elections all over the place because we're going to tax you less?
I would argue that they have. If you look at the Reagan election in 80, he was going to cut taxes by a third and did with the tax reform, the Kemp-Roth bill. And then in 84, Mondale was running against him and was ahead of him in some polls at one point. And Reagan took his head off in the debate when he got him to admit that he was going to raise taxes. Mondale gave a speech, said, I'm going to raise taxes. And Reagan said, I'm going to cut taxes, and did. And then when Bush was elected, George Herbert Walker Bush, to be the third term of Ronald Reagan, and made the mistake of thinking that he'd actually won the election instead of having it given to him by Reagan. He was losing to Dole until he signed the pledge never to raise taxes, and Dole refused, and that came up in the debate days before the New Hampshire primary that Dole lost. He said, read my lips in the convention. He was 14 points behind Mike Dukakis and said, I'm never going to raise your taxes. He signed the pledge, he said it in the debate, and then he won. And then 2 years later, he raised taxes, and despite an otherwise successful presidency, Soviet Union falls apart, no blood on the floor, Iraq kicked out of Kuwait. We didn't stick around for 25 years to supervise. And he loses because tax increase. And at the state level, red states are cutting taxes. Blue states used to raise taxes. Right now, they're scared. Most blue states are just sitting still, but the red states are cutting taxes.
Grover, didn't we already fight a revolution about this? Didn't we already go through this phase in America where we were sick and tired of paying taxes? Now, all of a sudden, I read a report a while back that 73 cents of every dollar we earn ends up going back to taxes because you have your payroll taxes, you have your employment taxes, you're paying taxes on your food, you're paying taxes on your vehicles. We pay tax on absolutely everything, double tax, triple tax, quadruple tax. How is this going to end? Do we have to have another revolution to get back to where we need to be? Taxation is robbery.
Taxation outside of the Constitution. Taxes pay for things that are not mentioned in the Constitution. That's theft. That's not bad government. It's theft. There's a lot of bad government, but you could waste money on defense. But it is mentioned in the Constitution. I think if it's mentioned in the Constitution, they may be able to do it. If it's not, there's a real question about whether it's something the government is constitutionally allowed to do. Pass an amendment if you want to make something the government's business. That has not been granted by the Constitution. I would argue, look across the 50 states. We've had 12 states now announce that their plan is to go to zero state income tax, no personal tax at the state level. We're 1.5 years away from New Hampshire becoming the 8th state with no income tax. Right now, they still tax dividends and interest. That disappears January 25. Nice. We're looking at North Carolina, which has had a 12-year phase down towards zero, and they're moving to speed up the movement to zero. Arizona, from 4.5 top rate to 2.5 flat rate, and now to zero. South Carolina had their first tax cut in the income tax in history. They'd never cut the income tax at the state level. And they're taking it down. And the governor, the Republican governor, says we're going to zero. And the Democrat he beat in the election in 22 also wanted to go to zero. That's bipartisan commitment to going to zero in South Carolina, which is amazing. West Virginia's voted to go to zero. The plan's in place. Kentucky's voted to go to zero. I mean, we are at the state level. You're already seeing people move from blue states to red states because taxes when there are not 7 states with no income tax, but we're heading to 20 states with no income tax. Everybody's going to be able to drive into a state next to them with no income tax.
That's outstanding.
Well, we're talking with Grover Norquist. He's an American political activist. He has been on the scene for many decades. President Reagan asked Grover to create this group, Americans for Tax Reform, and he has been rocking and rolling it for decades now. While things stay the same, they also change, and you have new situations and problems to deal with. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Grover, is this IRS situation with what appears to be, or at least what we're hearing, are more surprise attacks with homes and businesses. What are you finding out, and how do we deal with something like this?
Anyone listening who's had this problem with the IRS should call the Republican Judiciary Committee, because they are taking calls, faxes, emails, people who have stories to tell. You will be protected. There was a case that came up, was brought to the Judiciary Committee's attention. A guy from the IRS showed up, gave a fake name to a woman, said he was with the IRS, had to come in, wanted to look at her particular tax question, and she said, okay, and she showed it to him, and that was not a problem. And he said, well, actually, I'm looking about a different question entirely. She said, I'm going to call my lawyer right now, and the lawyer told him to leave the house. And the IRS agent said, I'm with the IRS. I can go into anybody's house at any time that I want. This is what they're teaching IRS agents. When that came to light, that person was not fired. The IRS did not jump up and down and say, that's not true. I mean, everybody knows that if the police knock on your door, you ask to see a warrant. The IRS evidently thinks they work under different rules, that they have no rules. And we've got more of these coming up. And now the IRS has at least 4,500 guns, 5 million rounds of ammunition. It's a lot of ammunition for each gun. I don't know who they intend to be shooting it out with. And when they were advertising, when Biden and the Democrats, not a single Republican voted for this, Biden and the Democrats said we want 87,000 more IRS guys. The advertisements they had said you had to be willing to use deadly force. What? Yes, that's the ad. Now they've taken them down, they've come back up again, but they were advertising for people willing to kill. They don't do that in the Marines, by the way. I've seen the ads for the Marines. They don't.
They're definitely becoming they're definitely becoming militarized, but I feel, and this is just my personal opinion, that they were hired to come after the middle class, to come after these small business owners, because I think the whole PPP program was just a big scam to get on the IRS's radar. As a business owner myself, I didn't apply for a PPP loan because I knew that once you did, as well as private contractors, of course, that once you did this, guess what? You are on the IRS's radar. They're going to wonder where all of your money is going. Who are you paying? What are you doing? And so many people I know who applied for a PPP loan or government disaster assistance, they've all been audited.
I think you're exactly correct that while Biden says that he never wanted to tax anybody who earned less than $450,000 a year. Okay.
A lie.
All the energy taxes hit everybody, the gasoline tax, everybody. Inflation hits everybody. Clinton said he was only going to tax people in the top 2%. Then Obama said you had to make more than $250,000 a year. 1 month in, he taxed cigarettes, average income, somebody who smokes cigarettes, $50,000 a year. And then Biden comes in with a new lie, $450,000 a year. That gets them through the election because the establishment press goes, well, he's never going to tax you. Well, yes, he is. He's lying. And if you look at their track records, but Biden says it's going to be the rich and big corporations. Who are they putting out new regulations on how to squeeze every last penny out of people who make their living mostly on tips? Barbers, people who do your nails, people in restaurants. Very few of those people who get most of their money on tips make $450,000 a year. That is directly targeting independent contractors.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Self-employed people. They hate independent contractors and are trying to make it illegal. You have to have a boss. If you don't have a boss, you can't be forced to join a union. So they don't want anyone to work for themselves. Everyone needs to have a boss, according to the Democrats. Then you can get your union dues taken. Then they can pay the Democrats money every year. And then they do that cycle again and again.
Wasn't it you, or maybe it was Steve Forbes, back the flat tax, 15% across the board, no matter how much you made. And somebody ran the numbers, and it was like just this amazing amount of money that was going to come into the kitty if we were on a flat tax system. And of course, you would have to get rid of some of the ridiculous spending. But is that still a thing? Is the flat tax a possibility? Are we going to be progressive or regressive tax conversations for the next foreseeable future?
Here's the good news. The flat tax was always a good idea. Again, 7 states are at zero. Another 12 states have flat taxes, okay? Illinois has a single rate tax at the state level, okay? You don't get too much more left of center. Massachusetts, up until this last year, had a single rate at 5%. And 6 times they put it on the ballot to get rid of it. And people in Massachusetts said, no, we want a single rate tax. We don't want people to divide different groups. The whole point of the graduated income tax is divide people into different groups.
Right.
So you mug them one at a time, and they never face a united people when they raise taxes. Here's the good news. The more states are moving to single rate taxes and then to zero. When you get to a single rate tax, it's very difficult to raise it. And when we have half the country, 10 years from now, half the country will have a single rate tax at the state legislative level, half the states. Then when you say, let's do this in Washington, everyone goes, I know what that is. I've lived with that. That makes sense. I think that it'll come back to Washington via the states.
Since you guys have been fighting for all this, how are we doing? Do you feel confident that we're moving in the right directions? How's the fight for taxation right now? Minus all the IRS agents with guns showing up at doors.
We got 20 billion of that 80 billion taken away in the debt ceiling deal. And we're going to just go back and bleed that again and again. That's the new thing. Whenever somebody needs some money, you say, we'll give you 5 billion from the IRS. How about that? So the left will gnaw away at those IRS agents wanting food stamps just as much as the right will take it down, because the IRS should not have, until it's reformed, they shouldn't even think about hiring one additional person. It needs to reform first. Well, we're winning. When you look at the states are cutting taxes across the board. They're moving towards zero. At the federal level, most Republicans have signed the pledge never to raise taxes. And since 1994, when 96% of Republicans signed the pledge, no tax increase is passed in Washington as long as the Republicans controlled Congress. And they have controlled Congress half the time, not between 1932 and 1994. 4 years out of 62, the Republicans control Congress. Now, since they've become the party in Washington that will not raise your taxes, they may invade small countries they can't pronounce, but they will not raise your taxes. That's enough to win half the time. That's not a bad start for a political party.
And you know, I'm a believer in taxes because I don't like to hit potholes. I hate potholes, so I'll pay taxes. If you're going to spend money, why not upgrade the system to where we have a system where you can go pay your taxes with a debit card or a credit card, and maybe a system where if you call an IRS agent, they answer the phone within an hour and a half. How about something like that?
Good luck with that.
So I do
not happening.
Yeah, I mean, maybe investing in the infrastructure of the IRS, but 87,000 IRS agents that are now armed in our communities. That is something to behold.
So you like constitutional taxes, not the other outside.
Exactly. Fair taxes, like where a business owner that pays his taxes, has employees, isn't paying 40% taxes, where someone else is paying zero. That seems insane to me. That seems like no skin in the game, get off the roads and go hit some potholes. But whatever. I mean, it seems to me like, I just hope that with organizations like yours and with the Dana Lash organization, I saw the Tea Party, I hope that we're keeping all of this stuff in check.
We're going to win.
Good.
I love that. You say it with such confidence as well. Before you get out of here today, Grover, and we appreciate the time joining us from your vehicle, can you let us know a little bit about the Credit Card Competition Act? We noticed you've been doing some work with that with your website as well, from saveourpoints.org.
Yeah, the Democrats went after first debit cards, and they wanted to instead of businesses and credit card companies and banks to negotiate, if we do all the transactions, we get a certain percentage of the cost, and they negotiate. There are lots of credit card companies. There are lots of banks. There's lots of competition. There are lots of stores. And the politicians came in and said, no, we're going to set that number. We're going to decide what it is. That passed narrowly, but it did pass.
Yeah.
What happened is this debit cards. They did it for debit cards. Now they want to do it for credit cards. All of the debit cards had these little point things. And if you use our credit card, you get this much money back. All the competition to get you to use their debit card went away. Now they're going to do the same. The Democrats hope to. I think we have the votes to stop them. But the Democrats hope to do this at Congress to take away all the credit card stuff that happens. They're going to squeeze the margins and say, we decide what the margin is, what the transaction cost is, instead of free market people negotiating. And as a result, you won't have any of those benefits and reward systems that we have now, because we saw them disappear when they did that to debit cards. So I think we can stop them on this, because people are very unhappy about politicians never told them what the cost of their brilliant new idea was. And people with credit cards go, I want that stuff taken away from me. Let me make these decisions.
Talking about credit cards and something that has scared the crap out of TikTok users for the last year, can you talk a little bit about Fed Now and how all of that stuff works with banking and how it works with the government surveillance and knowing your finances? And does that worry you at all of this centralized banking stuff?
The government wants to be opaque in how it behaves. It does not like currency for government. It believes the American people should be naked to any government agency that wants to know anything about you. Oddly enough, they want to know if you have a gun. Oddly enough, they want to know what you spend money on. They're looking to do individual. They're talking about not just industries being asked to go to net zero on putting carbon dioxide in the air. That's what you breathe out is carbon dioxide by person. The left of center groups are going, what we need is for the government to know everything about you so they know whether you're driving a car or flying on a plane and how much carbon you're doing, how often you're breathing, and all of these things about you so it can control everything about you.
Right.
That's why when you decide to control carbon dioxide, they say carbon, but it's carbon dioxide. They make carbon sounds, well, I don't have any. That doesn't affect me. Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. Trees breathe in carbon dioxide. Get rid of carbon dioxide, trees die. They want to control that level of your behavior. That's why they've got into this conversation of wanting us to eat bugs instead of steak. So we laugh at this stuff when it first shows up, and then it ends up as inevitable and a law that some jerk passed.
Mm-hmm.
We to early on call it out when you start hearing about it. And this lack of financial privacy is a big step towards 1984 kind of control.
Yeah.
There, Grover, there's no question. I started talking about lab-grown meat and people eating bugs years ago, and people thought I was absolutely nuts. Now here we are. And it is all about control. We know they're coming after private contractors because, they we're the only people off the grid. But now what I'm curious about, and we've talked about this on the show before, and people think I'm absolutely nuts for saying this, how do we fight back? Can we legally, I'm not advising anyone to do anything illegal. Can we legally come up with a movement to where we all withhold paying our taxes until the IRS forces us to pay? And would that wake them up if collectively we could get enough people to withhold their taxes legally?
I think we're in a position where we can, through the success at state level and the federal government, if we run a competent campaign on these abuses, that we'll be able to beat them straight out on a political fight. I do worry they would love to have civil disobedience because if you remember the Branch Davidians,
Yes, so we remember.
Yes.
other groups, they will hurt you, okay? And they will be abusive in order to scare other people. And
That's true.
while all movements need martyrs, perhaps, nobody wants to volunteer, and it's really no fair pushing somebody else into traffic. I think we can win this fair fight politically. And as you look at the states, people are leaving the blue states. Every 10 years, more electoral votes are in red states, fewer are in blue states.
Mm-hmm.
Team can't gerrymander that away, although they'll try and figure out a way to do that. And add to the movement of people moving to no income tax states, there are now 14 states that have passed education savings accounts where you have meaningful school choice, education freedom, where in Florida, they'll give you $8,000 per child to take to a private school, a public school of your choice, to educate your child at home, to do a pod. I mean, there are going to be ways that people get educated that we haven't even thought of because there wasn't that freedom before, and now there is.
Yes.
Grover Nyquist, you gave us a lot of time today. We are grateful. We'd love to have you back on sometime. Also, do you have any advice for people, for citizens right now who are watching, listening, or will watch this later on regarding how to better handle situations that are being thrown at them right now?
Our website is atr.org. And if you look at the IRS section of it, you'll see how people are fighting back and exposing IRS abuses. One of them, by the way, is more than half of IRS agents never go into the office. Never go into the office. I don't mean Fridays home. I mean never. And the 47 who sometimes go to the office, the IRS won't tell us, or it won't tell anybody whether they're there 1% of the time, 90%, half the time. It must be a lousy number because they're hiding it. So what may save us is the IRS agents who don't go to work.
Exactly. We can pray to God for that.
Don't tell them COVID's over.
Americans for Tax Reform President and founder Grover Norquist. Thank you so much for the information. We appreciate you. Keep rocking it, buddy.
You too. Take care.
All right. Lots of fun with Grover.